All right. So the other day we were on a call with a client, and her daughter was in the background, her young daughter. And
I
this is actually
remember.
the second time that it happened in about 2 weeks with another client and her
Hmm.
daughter. And I started thinking, as the kids are in the background and asking for things, change the movie and this and that, how normal and acceptable it is for people like us,
Hmm.
because we work from home and have small children.
Hmm.
So I was thinking maybe we can share some tips for for other parents who work from home and who also have small children. And
Yeah.
you do this way better than I do. So
I try. I try. I mean, I think, anyone who works from home and has kids, it's tough. Even if they're in school, even if they're in school, and it almost doesn't even matter how old they are, even when they're in school, it's tough working from home. And yeah, I think we could absolutely share a whole bunch of tips and sort of tricks to make that work for kids.
So first, and this is something you talk about a lot, is to condition your children. And I did not do that.
Mhm.
So maybe you want to talk about that.
I mean, for me, I think like, it's, your kids are there, and right, all kids get used to the situation, right? Kids like ritual, they like things that are repetitive, and I think what happens is when kids are young and you're working from home, you got to create that environment, right? And I'll give you a really good story. Like, I've been working from home for a long time, and when my older daughter was young, when she was like 2 or 3, she was super attached. Some kids are super attached to one parent. She was one of those kids that was super attached to me. And that was when I first started working from home full time. And it was crazy because what I would have to do with her, she was probably like 2 or 3, so she wasn't quite in preschool yet, or maybe she was like half days. I can't even remember at that point. Maybe she was like 3. But what I used to have to do is I used to have to leave the house, go out the front door, because there was babysitters, watching her, and I would go out the front door, and I would literally walk around the house, go into that house had an entryway to the basement where my office was, and I'd go in through the entryway to the basement, go into my office and work. And then, but I got a condition because, one of the benefits of working from home is that the fact that you're home and you get to spend some extra time with your kids, and you get to have some moments that you wouldn't have if you were in an office, right? And so what I would do is then every day around lunchtime, I would pretty much go back out the office door, walk around back to the front of the house, ring the doorbell so she could come to the door, let her answer the door, and then basically go back in the house. Even though I could have just simply ran down the stairs to the basement, do you know what I mean, and started working. And that was a good setup because I had everything in that basement, in that office I needed in the basement. I had
Did you have a
bathroom.
bathroom?
Yeah, I had a bathroom, so I didn't
Okay.
even have to go
I
upstairs
was
for the
wondering.
bathroom. I had like a kitchenette or whatever you want to call it down there. So like there was like, if I needed to, make coffee or, get something out of the fridge, it was there. So it was a good situation. But my point is I really had to condition her to go, okay, because she was very attached. And if you have kids that are very attached like that, I had to condition her the same way I would have as I was at the office. When you're working, right? And I think that's sort of what you have to condition them. Now, that's not always the case, right? You can't always really separate it that far.
Well, that leads to actually point number two I wanted to bring up, is that flexibility, right?
Yep.
Because I think that's something that we've spoken about as well. The second thing that we'd emphasize is being flexible within your own work schedule and not being so rigid, because things happen and they're home. And so you have to have that bit of flexibility in
Yeah.
your workspace too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you have to be flexible in your workspace. Like for instance, and most people who work from home have a designated office, right? They have an office that they're working in. But the reality is when you have young children, you got to be flexible with that workspace. You know, I think everyone who works from home, you try to work in your office, but what happens is if your kid's there and maybe you don't have the sitter that day, that happens with a lot of us, where you don't have a sitter. So you really have a couple of options with that. I think, what happens is you could go and, you need to do work. And obviously, we'll talk about the types of work you could do when you have kids, with you and when you don't. But with the space, I think what happens is you find yourself working, say, for instance, in your living room, so that way you're with your children, you're keeping an eye on your children, you're interacting with your children, they're able to sit with you, or you wind up having them in your office sometimes with their books or maybe an iPad or, their toys. So they're able to play while you could, focus on getting some stuff done. So I think really the workspace, don't get caught up in I need to be in my office to work.
Well,
Some days.
actually, it's funny you say that. When my son was sick one day, I had something I needed to finish. So I brought, and I'm downstairs. So I brought his chair downstairs and I set up his tablet right next to me, and he was not feeling well. So he was like cuddled up in this ball next to me and in this chair. And I just moved him here because he wanted to be with me because he's not feeling well. So I stuck him right next to me and set him up. So he's watching his movie while he's in this little ball,
Right.
like almost on my lap, but
Yeah, and it's definitely, obviously, we're talking about kids that are, a little bit older. You can't do that. It's a lot harder if it's a newborn baby, right? Or under, say, 2. But yeah, you could set the kid up next to you, and what's good too is it also starts teaching them work habits. Like I remember being a kid, and my dad was a businessman, and he would sometimes he'd come home, and like everyone, you have and he was in his he was in the like bar and restaurant industry, but he would bring stuff home to do, like whether it was the accounting or things like that. And he'd be like, okay, why don't you sit with me and go through, and you could pump these numbers into whatever it was. It wasn't Excel then, like Lotus 1 2 3 or whatever it was back in the day. He's like, and pump these numbers in here. So guess what, I learned a lot of skills actually, even as a young kid, sitting with my dad, actually going through and helping him with his business, So there's a lot that could be taken away too. I mean, I'm really good at math, I remember being a kid, spending a lot of time doing math and making sure numbers added up, just, playing with them. And a lot of times he'd be like, oh, I'll give you some money if you, hang out and help me with my work, and, cool things like that. So I think you find creative ways to, sort of incorporate them into your workspace and into your work. So,
but on the topic of math, so there are some things that you should not do when your children are
yeah.
there. So, I think the third thing would be not to do anything that requires some serious brain power. Don't start sending invoices with the kids there.
Right. Don't make really important business decisions that may be the future of your company like 5 years from now, while your kid is in the room screaming that they want some Oreos, right? Like that's not gonna work well. So I think that's a good point. I think one of the things is, when your kids are with you, you have to focus on things you don't need a lot of concentration for. They don't require your complete concentration, because you're going to wind up probably frustrating yourself and frustrating the child at the same time. And it's just not going to be a good experience for anyone.
So, yeah, I try to do things that are, I say, that are kind of, I say easy, but I use that term loosely. Not easy, but basic things.
Right, they're rote. They're
like
rote. They're mundane.
Creative writing, or anything that I really need to think hard about, I don't do. But if it's inputting information, maybe working in the CMS, or just putting together some newsletters or basic things like that, that's really simple stuff. I'll even have some quick calls, if it's just a quick phone call. I mean, no really important meetings, right?
Yeah.
And another thing that I think, so, number 4 would probably be to work your meeting schedule around when you have your children, which is pretty logical. I mean, just, don't schedule any, important meetings while the kids are there, and
yeah.
around that.
Well, I have this, and it's hard too for people who work from home. I know you start super early, Nicolette. I start usually a little bit later and work a little bit later sometimes, right? And I think, when you could do it when you have no distractions at 5 o'clock in the morning if your kids are not up. But I think, also too, what happens is you start, like, for me, if I get a call and you can't help it, sometimes you have to have a call or a meeting at 6 o'clock. it's okay if there's a little background noise. Don't get frustrated if your kids are making noise in the background, you know, like you
Right.
can't.
Yeah. And you brought up, waking up early, and that's probably the thing that saved my life is becoming a morning person, because I
Hmm.
wasn't always a morning
Hmm.
person. Um, but my child didn't sleep for the first, 3 years. So I didn't I had to adjust to no sleep. So I wake up very early, and what I do is I start my day 2 to 3 hours before he does, before he wakes up, so that I can get a lot of things done, get him off to school, and then I start the day again. I
Right.
start over, but I've already done all the things that while I'm fresh, I can accomplish a
Yeah.
whole lot in
Yeah.
that time. So,
No,
and maybe for some people, it's staying up later after they go to bed.
yeah.
It's just whatever kind of person you are.
Works. Yeah, and that's definitely where I think people too, there are days, and I think every parent knows this. There are days where it feels like before you even got your kids to school and got to your job, you worked a full day. Like to get that kid out of the house, to get them ready for school, to get their books, to maybe make their lunch, to whatever it is. You feel like you've worked a full day sometimes. That's how complicated it could be for some, parents in the morning, depending on, their situation. And I think that's a smart idea, being fresh and being able to do those things while your mind is fresh sometimes, before you get into that groove, and then coming back to it, right? And same thing, you may cool down at night, you may have dinner, and now the kids are in bed and you've relaxed for a little bit, and then you go back to the work. And I think part of it is having that flexible schedule, like doing things when you're, number one, when you're able to, so you're able to balance your work life balance, and spend a lot of time with your kids and spend your time working. But also I think it's also you're using it where your brain power, your mind is clear, and you're able to really make good, I don't want to say good decisions, because that's really the wrong word, but you're able to do your job the most effectively as you can.
And there are
So,
days that I'm more efficient in 3 hours in the morning than I
yeah,
am a whole day if my son is home. I mean, there's no,
yeah, absolutely.
like I said, I don't do a good job at that with him, because I
Hmm.
didn't start him off like that,
Right.
so
Right.
it was
Right.
a very different experience. But I think, one of the other things is to find people who understand and work closely with people who
Mhm.
also have children and know that children are, unpredictable. And so when we were speaking to those clients, and you can tell some people get embarrassed, and they're, I'm sorry, and they apologize, and it just, we don't care.
Yeah, no, no.
We don't care.
Yeah,
And
I have this thing, like, I mean, obviously with technology, there's a lot of video calls now. I have this thing, like, if it is after hours, let's say, you know what I mean, or in the afternoon, I would say half the people I work with probably have seen my kids pop into a video chat,
and your dog.
or my
Yeah.
dog. My dog
She's
is,
home all the time.
yeah, is a frequent visitor, because she hears people talking, and she's like, hey, what's going on, you know and the same thing, like the girls, I wouldn't say half the people, but like the girls, they'll come in, and it doesn't matter. There, even when the babysitter's here, they'll bolt into the room, right? And what happens is, they'll be like, hi, and they'll start talking sometimes to the people, and that's okay. Most people will understand that, because most people have had children, not everyone, but most people, and even people who don't, they understand that, because it's after hours, it's working from home. To me, I personally don't see anything wrong with it. It doesn't bother me, even if it's, whether it's a client or a customer, or someone that, one of our vendors, right? Because I understand it's life. I'm
Mhm.
happy that they're taking the time out of their personal life, and I appreciate that, to spend with me when I'm possibly available. So,
Mhm.
I appreciate that in people, and I think for everyone's sanity, that work-life balance has to be there. So,
And lastly, I think, you know, finding things for children to do to stay occupied,
mhm,
is something. And you have two kids,
mhm,
right? Which is good and bad, because there's fighting, but there's also, a friend. So it comes with its benefits, but
mhm,
I don't know. For me, it's a little bit more difficult. It just depends on your child. It really
yeah,
does. So some kids can sit there and play for hours by themselves, and
mhm,
some children, like me when I was a child, cannot play at all by themselves.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
wonder why I was blessed with the type of
Yeah.
child I have.
Well, it's funny too because I could pretty much keep my when I was a kid, I would pretty much keep myself occupied like for hours. I mean, hours. Like I'd play in my room and I would do this and that. And it's funny because I have the girls. They're twins. One of them is very much she'll play in her room for a long time, and the other one is very very needy. In terms of that time, right? She wants to spend that time with her sister or with you or whomever, and it's just it's really a balance. And sort of balancing that but she has her moments where she plays by herself, and I think it's really they get into that groove, especially if you're working from home every day. I think everyone gets sort of conditioned to that groove, and they know when it's time to play with themselves and when it's time that they could play with you, or they and really be part of the situation or what's going on. So I think it becomes the conditioning becomes very important, and I think it's interesting. You mentioned Occupy Kids. I got a little off topic there, but it's funny. I think every generation has had what you call an instant babysitter, you know,
Mhm.
and I think when like our parents were little, it was the TV, you know, when I was little, it was like the starter computers and video games, where like the instant babysitter. And I really think, you have the instant babysitters with younger kids now are really like iPads and things like that. I mean, look at all the laws that have gone in around YouTube and kid friendly videos, you know. So I think what happens is you have those instant babysitters, and don't get me wrong, I am not endorsing that as like what you should do. But what happens is I think every parent, sometimes you need those few moments and you say, okay, here's the iPad or here's the video game, go play the video games because you need to get stuff done. And I think, things that occupy, those are probably some pretty good things, as well as toys that keep them occupied, like
Right.
educational
And
toys or books. If your kids like reading, books
yeah.
are really good. Just make sure you know what kids are downloading on their iPad or their phones, right?
And not charging to your account.
Well, let me tell you something. Like my girls have iPads, and I actually think one of the best things Apple did is where they created the family plan. So basically what they do is if they want to download something, they're once again talking about conditioning. They know if it has money on it, not to download it. It's
Yeah.
only the ones that are free. But it sends it to my phone to approve it.
Mm.
And I have to approve it for them before they get downloaded. So I could go look and see what they're actually downloading
Mhm.
versus, especially, as you talk more and more face recognition and, this, the thumb recognition,
Mhm.
so they don't even need to know the password. They put their thumb on it and it's unlocking it, or it's looking at them and it's unlocking it. So this way it's actually a really good fail safe to know what they're accessing. So.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the last thing, one of the other things that I do, because I do, that tablet is a lifesaver some days when I have a really important meeting and I
Mhm.
need you to just really be quiet. And but I actually do this, like this morning, I had to do an on and off. My son was off of school, so
Mhm.
I woke up early, got in my 3 hours, did an hour with him, breakfast, get dressed, all of that, give him the attention. And then he was like, all right, I'm going to watch some whatever. And he did that for an hour. And then he wanted, more of me. So I went upstairs and I,
Yep.
spent another 40 minutes. I came back down. And then I went back up about an hour later and I put together a Ninja Turtle toy.
Right.
And so, there was a leftover toy from Christmas and we put that together, and then that kept him occupied until it was time for him to, go to grandma's. So it was, it's an on and off. And I
Yeah.
just, sometimes you have to save some old toys to take out.
Absolutely. It always helps to have a new toy around for them to be occupied. But I think what you're really pointing out, is the flexibility in it. You got to sort of, with kids, I think we're probably a lot of people find themselves getting frustrated. They're not rolling with the punches, you know what I mean? Because they're children, they're gonna over sudden they're going to want something else or they're going to switch gears. So you got to just sort of, be able to be flexible with while you're working. And that's why I think like, some of the things we talked about, working in sort of a common space in the house, like the living room, it makes it a little more flexible, being able to work on things that you could stop, and look at what they're doing, or if they need you to do something, or they just want to sit on your lap for a few minutes, you could do that, you know, and spend some time with them, or, you know, whatever, watch a video on their iPad with them if that's what they want. You know, I think really it becomes about being flexible when you're working from home to sort of, you know, to sort of balance it between getting some stuff done and you know, spending that time with your children. Honestly, I think people who work from home are very blessed in many ways, because you do get to spend a lot of extra time with your children that you wouldn't spend if you were, you know, in the office. So it may be starting earlier
Yeah.
or ending later, but
Well, you know what? It's a good point, because I just had a conversation with my son yesterday, and I tend to think that I don't spend time with him, even though I am home, because I feel like I'm not giving him that time, or he's at school or whatever. And yesterday, he was asking for dad, 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 dad. Where's dad? Where's dad? And dad's at work. And I said, how come you don't ever ask for mom? Where's what am I, chopped liver? And he said, Mom, I'm with you all the time.
right.
You're always home. You know, you're always with me. And I felt really good about that,
Yeah.
because I was like, oh, good. I feel like, okay, maybe I'm not, you know, I am there.
Yeah.
You know, and he knows that.
And I agree. You know, it was funny because my daughter said to me the other day, she's like, you know, she was like, wait, what do you actually do? Because she didn't realize like I was working because I'm with her so much, you know, and it was interesting because she was like, okay, other people go places, but you're here with me. And, you know, she felt very excited and happy about that, you know, that my life, you know, and like I said, I feel very blessed in this, that it is very flexible enough where I can spend the time with them, you know? So I don't know. So all you people that have to go to the office, you know what? No, I'm joking.
Well, actually, if you want to work with people, if you work from home and want to work with people who work from home and have chaotic, crazy lives, you can work with us, because
Absolutely.
we'll totally understand.
Absolutely.
Call us
Absolutely.
with your kids. We're here.
Also, your kids. We'll have kid video meetings between each other. They can keep each other busy while we're having a conference call, right?
That'll
So,
be the future.
yeah.
All right. That's all we got.
Uh,
Make sure you subscribe.
yes. Lots more tips.